Hello and welcome. It's been a while since the last video. I don't want to get political here, so let's just say that for a long time it was a question whether I am even going to be able to continue on YouTube or not, and after that uni took a lot of my time, as it always does. But somewhere between all of that I remembered about one project of mine, so today we are going to talk about it. This is Remaking, my first ever game 7 years later. To start this story, we have to go back in time, because context is very important. It was the end of 2015, and I was just starting my way into programming. That year, I decided to go to Samsung IT school, which was a great 1-year-long course about Android development. It gave me a head start into the world of programming, and was probably one of the most important moments for me as a developer. This course was separated into a few modules, covering a lot of subjects, including, as you've probably already figured out, game development. One of the homeworks of this module was to basically create any game using the foundation shown on lesson, which was a function that gets called every frame and draws something on the screen. It's something between Godot's process and draw functions. And to emphasize the sheer volume of opportunities we have with this homework, my teacher said,
"You can create absolutely any game you want, even one in which Hippo swims through the river and dodges logs."
"Well, if you say so," was my thought. So I decided to create exactly this, as a bit of a prank on him. Definitely not because of lack of imagination. 2 hours of coding and 15 minutes of searching for assets. Yep, you've heard it right. 15 minutes of searching for assets later, my masterpiece was done. Here, I present to you an original version of the Happy Hippo game, created by me 7 years ago. Isn't it perfect? Right, it isn't. There isn't a single aspect in this game which isn't flawed. It's perfect only in the sense of being a perfect example of self-growth, because not only I am making better things, or hope to think so now, but I can see the flaws in what I did back then. Approaching Remake, there was some obvious things I wanted to improve. First of them was non-existent art style, based off 2 stock images, which I probably don't even have a copyright for, and overall lack of content in the game. Second was gameplay itself. Slow and greatly lacking control over character, it was more like a boring roller coaster than a runner game. You had to first make a decision and input it, and then wait for at least a few seconds before you see the result of your actions. And the third one is overall polish. What I created back then is not a full game, only a prototype for one. To change that, it was necessary to add menus, some music, but the most important, scoring system, to give players a goal in the game. So, with all this in mind, I started by opening a sprite. Since general concept of gameplay was already done, there was no need in recreation of it with mock textures. We already know that it kind of works. Because of that, my first goal was to define an art style for this game. This time it took me more than a week with all the animations and such stuff. To remind you, assets for the first version took me a 15-minute googling session. Now that is definitely an improvement in the department of quality and care for product. I also approached art for this project a bit in a different way than any other one I've worked on, since I decided to work with one master canvas, which consists of all the art for the game. That way, I was able to see how the game looks overall at any moment. But I think in the future I'm going to stick with creating every asset separately from each other. Master canvas approach led me to not seeing that I didn't draw a few assets at one point, so I had to return at the middle of exporting process and finish these assets. This approach also made process of exporting more difficult in general, since now you don't have separately sized canvases for every asset, and a sprite doesn't know how to export them properly. It would either create a huge files for very small assets, or make it so that each frame has its own size, which is not going to work with Godot's animated sprites. There's also a grid option, but it knows nothing about relative positioning of frames against each other, so it might move some of them, again making animation look strange. After that, it was time to polish the gameplay. I decided to widen the river, adding 2 additional lanes to it, but at the same time using some of the new obstacles to limit it. I'm talking specifically about the spears, which have a chance to spawn on both sides at the same time, limiting options to original 3 lanes. I also was thinking about free control over the Hippo at its first stages of development and even have some footages of it. But this turned out to be more of a problem than a degree of freedom, since yes, you can move freely, but this means that you have to measure whether you are going to clear the gap or not on your own, which is not easy, and even after I made collisions of obstacles significantly smaller, it still felt unfair and unclear whether this diamond pixel would screw you or not. For that reason, I decided to return to just being able to move between lanes, which also fits controls of mobile devices a bit better. Next improvement to the game was an addition of coins, which simply add to your score and challenge you to move more and take some risks. There isn't much to say about this mechanic. Simple but effective way to give some control over difficulty of the game to players themselves, since they can either just play it safe and ignore coins, or risk and make the game a bit harder. Yet, even with all of these changes, there was still one thing that made this game feel unfair, and that's the length of the screen. If you can see, you can plan ahead. This leads to some situations in which player, based on information they had at the moment, decided to choose lane that was in fact blocked by an obstacle that didn't show up on the screen yet, making them lose not because of their decision, but simply because of the information they weren't presented with. Solution to this problem was inspired by popular game Jetpack Joyride and exclamation marks informing player about rockets in it. This allowed players to know enough information at any moment to make informed decisions about where to move. But I decided to ignore coins in this system, because they are designed to add challenge to the game, and thus there is no need to inform players about them. This would change coin dynamic from reactive to more strategic, which doesn't really fit the concept. So the last thing left to discuss is the scoring system. I made some research on how scoring works in different games, and then decided to go with mechanic similar to one in T-Rex Runner from Google Chrome, which basically adds 1 point to the score every 0 point something of a second. It's not speeding up or down, it doesn't depend on obstacles you've cleared. But what speeds up, same as with T-Rex game, are the obstacles themselves. Every point you get also adds a tiny bit of velocity to everything in the world, making it harder and harder to not crash into something. After all of that was done, I asked myself, what's fun in getting high score if you can share it with your friends? Based on this idea and some research on the subject done in the past, I decided to add global online leaderboard to the game. I'm not going to get into the details about it here, because tutorial about making leaderboards for Godot Engine games will be the next video on this channel. Subscribe to not miss it. For now, I'm just going to say that I have used Silent Wolf backend to implement it, and if you want to figure it out on your own, go to their site, and it's not going to be difficult. Otherwise, I dare you to go to Happy Hippo game and try to beat my high score on the leaderboard. It's actually not that hard. And here it is. That's the remake of the first game I ever created. I think the difference between these two footages says it all. But to finish this video, I want to reflect on all of it anyway. And the main thing I already knew, but was able to see again, is that look matters much more than mechanic. No crazy good algorithm, design of your code, or even insanely unique mechanic you created not going to matter without art to represent it. Even without any additional content, with only Hippo and logs, this game would be interesting to try. And this one wouldn't be even with all the content. Another thing I took from it is that simplicity might be interesting too. This game is so basic, like you literally clicking 2 buttons or swiping in 2 directions, looking at Hippo that only moves on 1 axis. And that's actually interesting. Interesting to play and to beat your previous scores. A few years ago I definitely wouldn't have even tried to remake this game, with the reason that it's too simple to be interesting. For me it was and still is important to have a reason for every detail in the game, have a story behind it, and etc. I would call myself a person of logic, and I really feel need for things I make to be logical. Thus, I'm making a lot of unnecessary depths that nobody actually is interested in. But, for some time already, I'm starting to find peace with simple and illogical concepts in my games, for the sake of game feeling fun and me not wasting time for nothing. Hippo just goes against the current of the river and dodges logs. That's it. No reason behind all of this, just because it's fun and cute. So, love simple things, do better art, and just be yourself. That's all I have for you today. I hope that this video was interesting and maybe even helpful for you, even though it's on the longer side. I also want to know your opinion on it. Leave comments down below, consider subscribing and ring the bell to not miss the next video, where I'm going to talk about adding leaderboards to your Godot games and making some cool stuff with it. But for now, thanks for watching. Stay safe, have a good day, and bye.